Hi, and welcome back to
Inspired to Game. I'm Sean.
And I am Lola. Today we are talking about Galactic Cruise. Now this is a 1 to 4 player heavy Euro game by Kinson Key Games. It is currently on Kickstarter. Now, before we give our review of the game, we are going to give you a quick overview of how to play it. In this game, you are competing to become the next CEO of Galactic Cruise. Over the course of the game, you will be accruing blueprints, building shuttles, advertising to tourists, and launching cruises, all to take people to their dream destinations in the stars. You have 3 different types of guests. Orange are for adventurers, purple are for guests that want to relax, and blue represents families. A turn begins by advancing any shuttles you've previously launched. This will include gaining rewards from time and space for guests that match corresponding rooms in your shuttle, or rewards for reaching corresponding destinations. The next thing you do on your turn is either assign a worker on the board, launch a shuttle, or call a meeting by pulling back your workers to your player board. When you assign a worker, you get to do 2 actions, either at the location that you placed your worker or on one of the adjacent locations if there is a development cog that connects it. Locations you can utilize include building a development. Pay the cost of the corresponding development cog you'd like to place out, and choose whether you want to place it out in the network to advance your reach during your turns, or above to access the technology developments. You can hire an expert worker. There are 2 expert workers that are locked on your player board. You can unlock them by paying the corresponding cost. They're different for each of them. When you do the gain supplies action, you can spend 1 money to gain 2 supplies on your player board and 1 money to gain 2 advertisements. If you do the acquire blueprints action, you can take up to 2 blueprints that are on the board. Each blueprint, which will tell you which type of guest will enjoy visiting it, as well as its build cost and its end of game scoring. At the build shuttle segments action, you can build up to 2 blueprints, either that you have previously reserved or directly from the board by paying additional costs. It requires 2 shuttle segments to make up 1 cabin for 1 guest. At the Acquire New Shuttles location, you can choose any 1 shuttle on the board and take that. You get the engine benefit immediately and can place it by your player board. You can have a maximum of 3 shuttles during the course of the game. At the Gain Resources action, you can take up to 3 resources that are available in the storage silo. At the Refill Silo action, you can discard 1 agenda card to move 1 resource to the top of the silo. You accrue the money you pass and gain a reputation point for doing so. At the Schedule a Cruise action, you can take your cruise consultant and place it at a cruise that hasn't been scheduled yet. Then you'll take 1 of your upgrade tokens from your launch tower, gain the reward from it, and flip it over. You can take the Advertise for a Cruise action. Here you can add 1 to 2 guests to a cruise location, whether scheduled or not. You'll immediately gain some money and some reputation points for doing so. This will cost you a certain amount of advertisements depending on where you take your guests from. At the Draw Agenda Cards action, you can draw up to 2 agenda cards face up on the table. If you'd like to, you can spend 1 reputation to take the face-up card on the discard pile. These can be used either for their text ability or the resource on the bottom of the card. When they're used, they are put into the discard pile. You can also do the Refill Agenda Cards action. First off, you will gain the reward from any of the empty card locations. Then you will empty whatever is remaining there and draw new agenda cards. Now on your turn, if you choose to launch a shuttle instead of one of those other worker actions, you will take 1 of your workers and place them at the bottom of your launch tower. Launching a shuttle is a 5-stage process. 5. Assign your scheduled cruise to 1 of your shuttles and place guests into each cabin. 4. Place a progress cube from your supply into the progress track. 3. Pay your resources. 2. Score cockpit. Each one will be different. When you do this, you flip it over. 1. Load up. You will take the upgrade token that was flipped when the cruise was scheduled and place it on your engine. 0. Liftoff. You will take your worker and place it into the cockpit. This is now your pilot for the cruise. Now, instead of placing a worker or launching a shuttle on your turn, you can call a meeting. This means essentially just returning your workers from the board back to your player board. When you do this, you immediately can take a funding reward for each worker you place back. You also get to do one action, connect to one of the development cogs you have on your board. The last thing you do on your turn is see if you have achieved any company goals. If you have, you take one of your cubes from above that goal and place it on the next space on the progress track. You then advance the threshold from that goal one higher. Now it takes a little bit more for the next person to accomplish that goal. Now, the progress track is the timer of the game, and it's divided into 3 sections. When the first section is complete, at the end of that player's turn, it will be scored. Same thing for the second, and the third one is scored along with the end of the game scoring. Once the last cube is placed within the third section, the end of the game is triggered. You'll finish that round, and everyone will have one final turn before everything is added up, points are tallied, and you see who is going to become the next CEO of Galactic Cruise. I am absolutely in love with this game. It is so very good. I've been thinking about this, and I think that this might be one of my top 5 games of all time, and we feel and we're hearing that a lot of people are saying this just may be the game of the year, and I tell you what, it deserves that title because it is that good. So it's nice and heavy. It makes me think of a Lacerda game. It is crunchy, but at the same time, it's very accessible and intuitive. So there's really a ton of things going on here. And one of the things that we love the most is the amount of strategic choice is astronomical. There is so much that you can do. And each time you set up the game, it's completely different. From setting up each of the action locations, moving them to various places because it's random each time. Same thing with the technology tiles, as well as the company goals, what blueprints you have out there, the rewards you get from your day in space, and even the power of your expert workers. It's going to be different. So all of these differences mean that each time you are going to be playing this game with a different strategy or a different focus. It just makes it so replayable and so interesting every time you get it to the table.
That is one of my favorite aspects of this game. You're never going to have 2 games exactly the same.
Yes. And the theme is strong with this one. Unlike some other Euros that are well known for being more of a pasted on theme, it doesn't really matter, it's just there for aesthetics. It's strong here. It really shines through, and it's really exciting and fun as well. I remember launching my very first shuttle, and I was so excited to do so. I love all the different blueprints that have really interesting rooms that make it fun and exciting, and I also love the launch process. So when you use one of your workers to begin the launch, and it's a countdown, it's an actual countdown, 5, 4, 3, and each of these stages there's something that you need to do, so it's nice and functional in that it makes it really easy, really intuitive to do the next thing. You don't have to remember some really elaborate construction of tasks. It's all right there while your pilot is progressing up to the top and then taking their place in the cockpit. It's so thematically rich that way.
And the board is fantastic for helping guide you through the steps of a launch or what you can do each turn. The iconography, the board is packed full of these little helpful tidbits and icons that help remind you what you can and can't do at different stages of the game.
And that's really nice, and that's part of what makes this game so intuitive and really actually easy to play. Despite being heavier, it's not a hard game to play. And for our first few games, we hardly needed to consult the handbook or the rule book at all because everything is so nicely laid out, and that's a really nice feature. It's minor, but it really helps for the flow of gameplay. Yeah.
And I think part of what they're doing with that is they have an intro game that they step you through for your first play. Now, I believe the plan is for the board to be double-sided and for that intro game to be printed on, so you don't have to go and find certain tiles. They're going to be printed on that one side, and then when you're ready after your first intro game, flip it over, and now you're into the random elements.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really nice feature. Now, the art here is by Ian O'Toole, who does fabulous work, but we do want to let you know this is a prototype that you see in all of our images here today. So there are some tweaks still coming down the pipe, which will be really exciting too. One of the features that I think is really neat as well, I love how the blueprints flip. So you take blueprints and they don't cost you to take, you just get to take them. But when you pay the cost to build them, it's just flipping them over. I think that that's a nice, handy way of doing things. Now, I also love the versatility of the worker placement actions. For one thing, when you go to an action, you get 2, but you're not restricted to those 2 actions where you went. If you have the developments nearby, you can have up to 6 potential actions with that one placement, which means there's so much versatility in what you can do. You can even bump workers, which is fantastic as well. Because you get those worker placement games where your whole strategy is predicated on one location and the person before you took it just right before you, and now you have to wait till the next round or whatever, and it can be really frustrating, and it introduces more luck into it. So having the ability to go anywhere if you really need to bump or to use different actions within the same turn means that there's more strategy here, and it just decreases how much luck is around, which is something I really love. And the 2-player variant goes really well. Sometimes that's tricky to get well in especially a heavy Euro game. So with the 2-player variant, you do play with the workers as well as developments of another player on the board that can be utilized, that can be bumped, and it just makes it smoother. As well as you go through the various scoring levels, you add more of those things as well. So it nicely simulates having a 3rd player, which does make it run nice and smooth without having to have an automa or anything. And we really were impressed with how the game is timed with the progress track, which makes it highly variable based on how you play. There are different progress tracks if you're playing 1 to 2 or 3 or 4 players that you put out that have different spaces for cubes. Now these spaces are filled in as you do stuff, whether you're sending up shuttles or whether you're completing company goals. Each time you do one of these things, another cube goes out. There's level 1, and then you do a scoring, a level 2, and a scoring, and then the 3rd, that once that's full triggers the end of the game. But what that means is if you're playing with somebody and maybe you're taking a bit more time at accomplishing things, maybe you're not rushing out on your flights, maybe you're taking a bit of time to get those company goals happening, well, that buys you more time in the game. So instead of the game just being like 8 rounds, no matter what you've done, it moves to the speed of you. And that is really creative and just such a wonderful idea.
And it's also nice that the actual progress track, those company goals, as you complete them, you have more of a multiplier now when you go into the annual general meetings to get your score for that section. If you've got more goals completed, then you have an extra multiplier.
One thing that's really satisfying too, when you put out your flights and you go on those destinations, you can rack in some really satisfying great points, but then above that, those upgrade tokens that you put on your engine that then you put on a destination when you get to your destination unlock some pretty awesome powers and abilities. So these are wonderful to get to, these are wonderful to unlock, and each destination has 3 different choices for when you first go up there to unlock. And so you can choose which power you even want, and with how it works into your strategy of the game. It's just really, it works just so well. Everything in this game works well. It's smooth, it's brilliant. This is a brilliantly designed game, and that it is the designer's very first game is, as we've heard said elsewhere, incredibly impressive. And the shuttles that you choose, yeah, it makes a big difference in your strategy of your game there as well, because each one will have a scoring mechanism that it happens as soon as you launch the shuttle, but also when you launch it again and at the end of the game too. So they can be really powerful if you choose something that works well with your strategy, or you move your strategy along with it.
And there's also the power-ups of the engine section as soon as you grab it that you get, but you don't want to just grab them, because if you have a shuttle that I just grabbed to get the power up, that's -5 points if you never launch it.
The agenda cards are really a nice addition to the game too. They add a lot of spice and variety. They're something that I really enjoy utilizing in really powerful ways.
And it's variable because you don't just use them for the powers, you can use them for a resource.
The reputation track is also a fantastic feature, so as you have chances to move up it, if you move up enough, it's going to make the cost for using somebody else's production lower. But it also gives this extra benefit that if you really need a resource to pull off the amazing maneuver you want to do, maybe you just need a couple more money or a couple more ads, you can actually progress down the reputation track from where you are and gather one resource, that amount, based on how much you go down. So it can get you out of a bind if you really need it, but if you just push up and go up to the top, there's lots of rewards there as well, because then if you get to the very top, which happened in our first game, you keep on getting extra. It goes into victory points, which can be really choice and beautiful. So it's a nice mechanism that makes your strategizing a little bit easier if you need it. And if you don't need it, the higher you go up, the more points you get at the end of the game. So bottom line, obviously we are very impressed with this game. We love it. We've had so much fun with all of our plays. And like I said, you don't have to even love a heavy Euro to get in on this one. It is fun, it is engaging, it is accessible, and it is intuitive while still having a satisfying crunch to it. So if this is a game that sounds interesting to you, we will have a link down to the Kickstarter page where it is currently live. Thank you so much for watching today.
If you've enjoyed this content, please support the channel by subscribing if you haven't already.
And as always,
happy gaming, folks.
This is a 1 to 4 Euro game currently on Kickstarter.
It only costs 1 to 4 euros. Isn't that so great?
And for our first few games, we didn't even, well, okay. And blue are for family adventures. No. And blue are for family clients. No. And blue represents families. Technology what?
Tiles.
Yeah, thanks. Without having to have an A. That led to another thought, and now I've lost that thought. Oh, the thoughts are going. I'm losing all my thoughts. Because I just have so many, and they get clogged up.
If you've enjoyed this content, please support the channel by subscribing. How? How do we support the channel?